Well, thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. I remember being here 4 years ago when very few of you knew me and I knew very few of you. And I was seeking your endorsement then, as I am this evening. And I must say that there is no other endorsement that would please me more than the endorsement of the people that work with me at the Sheriff's Office every day. It'd be a privilege to receive your endorsement. I wanted to talk just a minute in my opening about what an executive is, what a chief executive is. And the sheriff is obviously the chief executive of the Monterey County Sheriff's Office. I have executive experience starting in 1990. I've been in law enforcement since 1976, and I was promoted to sergeant 30 years ago. I was promoted to commander 26 years ago. I was promoted to captain, which is now deputy chief in the Salinas Police Department in 1990, and served there in that capacity for 8 years, leading all 3 major divisions of the Salinas Police Department, before I was selected to be the chief of police for the city of Pacific Grove in 1997. I spent 6 years as chief in Pacific Grove, and then got elected to be sheriff in 2010, in the election of 2010. In between, I served 4 years as an elected member of the Pacific Grove City Council, so I've seen this job from all different angles. The difference with executive experience is the issues that you see as an executive are far different than any you see as a commander and certainly as a deputy. With all due respect to Steve, I don't personally believe that a deputy can possibly be successful as a sheriff. And I think it's extremely difficult for a commander to be all they can be as the sheriff of an agency our size. The demands on the executive are immense. It's easy to be a sheriff and ride in parades and ride a horse and things like that, but it's difficult to do the varied responsibilities that you have as sheriff. You have the opportunity, and I've handed out a list to most of you. A few of you have snuck in since I handed out the list, but a list of what I see as accomplishments of the organization under my watch. And it's a fairly extensive list, but of course doesn't include everything in the way of accomplishments. But these are accomplishments that I didn't achieve myself, but we achieved together as an organization. And there's much more to do. But just to highlight some of the accomplishments that we've managed to have as an organization in the last 3+ years. Improved training and equipment. As most of you know, we've doubled the amount of range qualifications and made them much more job-related, life-related, and situational types of training scenarios. More than doubled training for most employees, including getting people back to professional conferences for your associations that you belong to. We've gone back to monthly SWAT training. It's been restored and improved. We utilized community donations to reestablish our canine program, and we now thankfully have 2 canines back, with more hopefully on the way in the near future. We obtained community funding to purchase a Cessna 206 aircraft to help with law enforcement efforts. We trained a number of deputies to be crime scene investigators so that we can expedite crime scene investigations and investigate more crime scenes more professionally than ever before. And those are just some of the things in training and equipment that we've improved on. In terms of efficiency measures, I've established an exceptionally well-qualified executive team. Jim Colangelo was the former assistant CAO of Monterey County. John Gerton, the Administrative Services Director, was in the CAO's financial office. He knows where all the money's hidden. They can't pull tricks on us. And we get funding as we need to have funding, and you've noticed that most likely in the things we've been able to purchase. Among those things, we're implementing a new records and jail management, records management system that costs almost $1 million. And we went out and got that money to replace CJIS, which had been antiquated about 15-20 years ago. So that's a major improvement, and that will tie us into the records management systems of every agency in Monterey County except for King City, Salinas, and Delray Oaks. So that's a big improvement. I'm implementing a one deputy philosophy, as you've noticed, where when people come out of the academy, we get them trained in both field operations and in corrections. And that's really paid off in recent months. For example, during the recent Big Sur fire, we were able to pull deputies out of corrections who had been through the FTO program and assign them in one-person cars down in Big Sur. And that's an example of what we can do when people have cleared the FTO program. And that's a theory and a philosophy that I want to keep going until everybody who wants to be is trained in both disciplines and can be interchangeable throughout the organization. I'm sorry, was that 5 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, and please read our accomplishments here.
Do you have the 4 questions that we sent, the emails, or would you like me to read them?
Please read them.
Okay, I'm gonna read them, but I don't remember what order I sent them to you, so I'm gonna kind of go in the order I remember. With GPS technology on the radios, with the body cameras, the car cameras, what protections are you going to ensure that the deputies don't feel like they're being spied on, or the staff doesn't feel like they're being wrongfully treated by the videos and the electronic equipment?
I think the key to that question was, the 2 words that I got out of it was unfairly disciplined. What will you do to ensure that people aren't unfairly disciplined? The rest of it about GPS and, you know, wear on cameras and all that rest of the stuff, most of that stuff is designed for officer safety, actually, so that if we can't reach you, we know where you are and things like that. It's for dispatch centers so that when they see where your car is, they can more efficiently deploy you to calls for service. Instead of sending someone from the other side of the county, they see you're 4 blocks from where the call's coming in and you go there. But the key to that is, what will we do so that you're not unfairly disciplined because you're electronically tracked? My philosophy is you never unfairly discipline anyone. So like every other incident, you would look at all the facts of anything if anyone were to bring up anything to do with the electronic monitoring part of any disciplinary action. I don't foresee any of that happening. That's always been, it's been a long-term argument that people have had about just having GPS on board in cars. But basically all of us have GPS on board in one way or another on our person, like I do right now with my iPhone, or in your car, or however it's going to be. And it's actually should be seen as a safety measure. If you have trust and confidence in the people who are meting out discipline in an organization, then that should be no problem whatsoever. And if you don't trust the people that are doing discipline, there's nothing that you can do to change your mind about that.
Okay. The county has said that next year's budget is going to be status quo, which puts us several $1 million in the hole already. Where do you see cuts coming to? Where do you? I get tongue-tied the last time too. Where would the cuts be made to overcome this problem? Sorry.
And this is an excellent question that highlights executive experience. I've been working with multi-million-dollar municipal budgets since 1990. And we've had successful budgets the last 3 years of the Sheriff's Office. You'll remember that the first year that I took office, within a month or 2 of taking office, the county told us to eliminate $12 million from our budget. We negotiated that down to $5 million, and then thankfully with the help of the DSA, we were able not to lose any people that were actually in badge positions. We did lose vacant positions. But we have already begun negotiations with the CAO's office so that we do not have any reduction in personnel, period. No professional staff, no badge staff, not even vacant positions. Because as we're trying to play catch up now with the positions we lost, even though they were vacant back in 2011, it takes at least a year and a half from the time you start recruiting an individual deputy recruit to the time they're serviceable as a solo deputy. We can't do that. So we've already begun that process. We've already put them on notice that we are not losing any people. And what we will do is try and reduce those impacts on us through the internal service funds, things like IT, HR, the auditor's office. Most of the increases in the budget for the next year are through those internal service funds, which those need to be status quo as well. Our liability insurance is going up $1 million. We can work on knocking that down too and having the county pick it up. But we will be dealing with tough budgetary times for the foreseeable future. We can't afford to lose any positions, and we won't. I'll fight for that.
Okay. What changes need to be made in our department, and how do you plan to implement those changes?
You know, it's one thing as probably thing I have going as the current sheriff is that if I've seen something that needed changing, we've either changed it or we're working on changing it, or it's in progress now. Probably what's more important is the process we use to affect change in the sheriff's office now. 2 examples would be, and I would add that getting ideas on change don't always germinate in my mind or the executive staff's mind. Some of the best ideas we've had come from everyone in this room and the rest of our coworkers. For example, eliminating contact visits in the jail. How big has that been in reducing contraband in the jail? reducing the time it takes to supervise people that were out on those benches. I've heard from all kinds of people how contraband has come down in the jail since that happened, and that was the idea of Sergeant DeFranco many years ago, and it didn't get implemented. Once that idea came to us, it got implemented with the help of Jasper and the rest of the folks in the jail. That's an idea that came up through the organization. We were able to implement that change. And that's what has to happen for any good change to take place, is the idea has to come forward. We have to be aware of what the issue is, because you know better than us at the line level what things need to be fixed. So we are trying to have an environment where those kinds of ideas come to us and we act on the good ideas. Shift change is an idea that sounded really good. We fleshed that out 25 different ways before we finally settled on the way to do it. We continue to monitor how shift change is going. We know some people love it, some people don't, some people are in the middle. But that was about the 10th or 15th or 20th iteration of that we worked together with the DSA board and others to make sure that was as good as it could be.
And what challenges do you foresee for the office in the next 4 years? And how do you plan to deal with those challenges?
If you look at the end of my handout I gave you, that lists some of the ongoing challenges we have. The number one priority is filling all authorized positions within the organization. Professional staff, badge staff, all of those positions, that's job number one. Increasing the number of detectives is number two. Dealing with projected budgetary shortfalls will jump to number one when they tell us how much money we have as we fight and struggle to get more money out of the county. Constructing the jail expansion is no easy task. It's an $89 million project. As the county officials said, this is the largest building project in the history of Monterey County. So that's something that will take some stability and some continuity to have that come to fruition. And we'd like to implement a 10 plan for corrections. You know, we looked at that, but the staffing numbers right now, although we originally planned to do that, they don't quite work quite yet, as well as patrol works at the moment. So those are all challenges we'll be dealing with. You know, the budgetary shortfalls is probably the one that oversees everything, because depending on how much money we get to do the job we have to do, that's key. But filling positions to me is the number one priority. And if we lose the money for authorized positions, then filling positions won't be an issue because we won't have any money to fill them. So those are some of the biggest challenges facing us.
Okay. So the next phase is, I was expecting a lot more questions, so I was going to have you pick one, but there's only 4.
Just make some up, Dan.
These are questions from the audience. You'll have 10 minutes to answer as many as we can get through. And again, these are from the audience. So. Okay. Are there any decisions that you regret? And if so, what would you change?
In my life, or since December 31st of 2010? In terms of the job, you know, you look at everything you decide and you discuss things, and that's one, it really is a benefit of the experience of having served at the executive level for the most part since 1990, where you know kind of the process you want to go through before you make decisions. For example, with promotions, we do a very thorough process now. I speak individually with all the candidates that are on a promotional list. I receive the input from many of the people involved in the process, the people who are going to have to be working with the people who get promoted. And we thoroughly vet everything before those decisions are made. And that's kind of the process we do with a lot of things. I can't think of any particular decisions that I've made that I would change that I didn't change anyway. Because the key to a flexible and adaptable organization and a flexible and adaptable sheriff is when you realize something isn't going in the right direction, you're ready to change it. And if you're not ready to change it, if you dig your heels in and say, you know, I made this decision, by golly, we're going to follow this come hell or high water, then you shouldn't be in a position of leadership.
Do you think your troops trust you?
I'd like to think so. I believe so. I haven't heard to the contrary. And the way that I think you develop trust is you earn trust, and you do it by being consistent and fair and following the same guidelines and not being inconsistent, but being consistent in the decisions you make, from promotions to selection of new employees to how budgets are determined and everything else. So as You know, I haven't heard anything to the contrary. I'm not next to to a car partner or two talking about what they think of the sheriff or whether they trust me, but I'd like to believe that the level of trust is high.
The jail is not happy with the new swing day. Would you be open to changing it back?
You know, when we met with the DSA board and everyone who took part in that, and some people who took a big part in that are in the room, we're open to anything. As I've said at the briefings I attended, I think it's worthwhile to try to see how the 10 plan goes, because 12-hour shifts tend to suck the life out of you. And given the amount of people we have that live in other counties and other far-flung places, when you add 12 hours plus mandatory overtime plus commute time, I don't know how you even manage to do it. So I am a proponent of 10-hour days in terms of not grinding out 12-hour days, and we can be flexible and adaptable and open to any suggestions that come back. We'd probably need to hear from the DSA board and get that feedback from the employees and see what people think, but we're open to anything like that.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience?
7 there.
Dave?
Sheriff, going back to 2010, when you were elected, we talked about regret, trust, decisions you may have made. You and I have had several hard, difficult conversations about issues. I'm trying to summarize everything I've heard over the last 3 years since a very vicious election cycle back in 10. You came in hard, you came in fast. A lot of bodies were being affected. Moved, dismissed, early retirement. Some were by their choice. Some, and then there was that perception of you coming in the house from the outside. A lot of people scattering. We don't know if they were getting forced out, ran out, or by their own choice. I chased a lot of those names down. Dennis English said, I left because we were facing a tough budget, and if I left and retired, I thought I could save a job. You know, I talked to others that said I left because I don't know which direction we're going in. So I see you come in. I see a lot of hard movements by an executive. Kind of quieted down. I look at your list of accomplishments, whether they're by your hand or by the hands of your staff. Hard to argue. I mean, I see them, I hear them.
Go ahead, Dave.
Do you have a
There's a question.
I think there's a question in here, and,
Sure,
and
please.
it's trust, regret, and it's the ultimate one, binding arbitration. We had you in the same spot in 2010, and we thought we heard that coming from you. I mean, I know we have a video out there, and binding arbitration was not put in place. Do you have a thought on binding arbitration?
Yeah, you didn't participate in negotiations this last MOU, did you?
I did not.
There was an entire dialogue on binding arbitration, and there was give and take. There was an offer made that was consistent with what I said in 2010. In fact, I have not been inconsistent from anything I can think of from 2010. But if I could, just a word, and I think you took up most of my remaining time with the statement there, but in terms of when I came into office, one thing that was important to me was try and maintain as much stability with the existing structure and organization, and to respect tradition, respect people who had been put in certain places. There are still people in places now that thought they were going to be moved immediately that are still where they were when I came in 2011. People in this room that are still in those places. And in terms of all the people leaving, you'd have to ask each individual why they left. Like you said, some people retired, some people didn't. But that first transitional period of the first few months, you're going to expect a lot of that to happen. I can imagine if any of my opponents come into office, how much movement there will be. You know, part of their platform, a couple of them are running on, is getting rid of some of the executive management team. And other than that, there wasn't much I did other than the executive management team pretty much moving, and all but one retired. So I would disagree with your characterization of those first few months, and that I really did try and respect tradition and move slowly in many of the things we did. In fact, to our detriment in some things. In fact, if there was anything